Welcome to the Kentucky High School Athletic Association Internet Broadcast Network. Following broadcast is the property of the individual broadcaster. All rights are reserved worldwide. Thanks for tuning in. Now, enjoy the program.
Welcome, and thanks for listening to Old Goat Radio.
Now, here's your host for tonight's show, Buzz Frank.
Welcome back, fans, to another edition of Old Goat Radio, coming to you from the Joe Hutt Fieldhouse at Manual Stadium. Along with David Wright and Kevin Cole, I'm Buzz Frank. And as always, our producer, John Wright, is at the controls. Today, our very special guest is former Manual All-State football player Wilbur Hackett. Wilbur went on to have a great trailblazing career at the University of Kentucky and has many current successful ventures going today. He has also been one of the subjects covered in a recent HBO special, Breaking the Huddle, and he is a football official with the SEC. Wilbur, welcome to Old Goat Radio.
Thank you for having me.
Well, one of the things we usually like to do is kind of go through the years with the guests that we have, and so what I'd like to start with, how did you come to Manual in the first place? I know probably a lot of the high schools would have liked to have had you come, and you went to Manual.
Well, I chose Manual because, first of all, it was for the academics. And secondly, many of my friends that I grew up with playing football and baseball, Franklin Foreman and Nelson Hewitt, some of the guys that I went to junior high school with, went to Manual, and I knew Manual had a strong football tradition. So that dates back to Sherman Lewis and some. So I've always followed Manual, but I never really thought about it until my friends were going to Manual. So and because of the football tradition, I decided to attend Manual.
Well, the people who've been involved with Manual over the years should thank Franklin Foreman, Nelson Hewitt, and your other friends for bringing you to Manual, because certainly you were a storied and still are a legend at Manual. And I know I have a lot of memories because I was a year behind you and we shared the field together, and have used you as an example to many people over the years. So tell us a little bit about how your career got going at Manual, and we'll talk about, of course, the state championship year as we go along. But as your sophomore year unfolded, how'd that work out?
Well, our coach was Tom Harper.
Mm-hmm.
And Coach Harper he was very special. I think he saw the moldings of the makings of a championship team, a very good football team.
Yes.
And of course we had we already had a good team, but I think he knew that this team was going to be very special. So he kept us together. Sophomores, as a matter of fact, some of the sophomores that made the varsity, we traveled and he put us in the game. But he molded us as a unit as sophomores, and of course as seniors we played, and you played with us. We were eventually the state champions. But I think the makings of a great team, I think our Coach Harper and the rest of the coaches saw from my sophomore year on.
Now, Coach Harper left before I got here, but I remember you and the other players who played for him telling the stories of how when practices would go a little bit late, and in those days we practiced here at the stadium on the field that's now a parking lot and a baseball field, and that Coach Harper would holler something to Harvey Sanders like, "Harvey, turn on the lights, we're not finished," and you'd come out on the game field and practice.
Well, I'll tell you, Coach Harper was special. He was I don't know if he played for Coach Bradshaw, who was my college coach. I played with him, but he was an old UK man, and back in those days, football players were a little tougher, or had to be very tough in order to survive. And it made it again, what they sent us to, or what they put us to, made us just very tough and a team to be very competitive. So they made us tough. So so if we didn't get it done while we were in the allotted amount of time, then we had to go extra. So. It just made us a tough team.
Made us tougher and better, and I believe Coach Harper actually played with Coach Bradshaw for Coach Bryant when he was at Kentucky.
Okay, so there's a connection.
Yeah.
I knew it had, because some of the same things that happened here happened at UK. So
and they learned,
similarity.
and of course I remember the Junction Boys movie on ESPN, and that wasn't while Coach Bryant was at Kentucky, but apparently hearing some of the players who played at Kentucky for him, he took them down to Eastern Kentucky, and it was pretty tough down there.
I'm sure it was.
And I know one of my ex-teammates, Bill Ferris, and I were talking not long ago that we could remember 2 water breaks in 3 years that we had at Manual.
Speaking of water, I see when I do the scrimmages now at the different schools, and when I go and do games in my college football officiating, I see all these machines that have water. I tell my kids all the time, I tell my grandkids about the story about how we got water. We would put a wet towel in a bucket of water, and everybody drank from that towel, sucked the water out of the towel, and I can't tell you some of the stuff that we saw in that bucket, but that's all we had. So it was tough. So a lot of people don't understand that, but that was the way. And so anyway, it made for the makings of a tough team.
Now, one of my first memory of you was actually before we met. It was your junior year, my sophomore year, and we were lined up to get equipment, and I was way in the back of the line, and at that time the JVs and the varsity didn't practice at the same time. Varsity was getting ready to practice, we were just getting our equipment, and all of a sudden here comes a guy out of the varsity locker room running around, full gear already on, it's 95 degrees in July, running around already sweating, pumped up, saying, "Come on guys, let's get going, Hack is ready." And I know that some of the guys there looked up, and I heard a few comments of, "Who is that?" And the word came down, "Well, that's Hackett." And at that time, I thought, okay, well, now I know, and here you were, one of the stars, even as a junior, on that team, and you were the first player out of the locker room ready for practice. So that says a lot to me of how you were able to have the career that you did, because you were prepared and ready, but you were also ready to give that 100% effort.
When you have a passion for what you're doing, then you don't hold back. And I love football. Not only did I love football, I love DuPont manual football. And so I was eager. It's one thing, excuse me, that I always say, you practice. Practice makes you who you are and what you are. So my idea of being a good football player was to go 100% all the time, and you practice just as hard as you play. And when you love what you're doing, it's easy to get into it. And I just enjoyed or loved what I was doing. So heck yeah, I was ready to get out there, and that's what I do. And that's why I think I'm still a part of the game today, is because I have a passion for football. And if there's any way I can continue to stay in it, I will.
And it's one thing to hear the coaches say that because they preach it every day, but when you see somebody else, particularly one of the team leaders, doing it, I know it had a real impact on me. Obviously, if I can remember it some 40 years later, it must have had a big impact on me. And so you impacted my life as well as manual football, just to let you know.
I'm glad it could be. That was one of those positive experiences that I had, because I had so many others. But I'm glad I could do that, and certainly it was not hard, especially with a player like yourself.
Well, some of the other impacts were physical, and we'll discuss them later. But your junior year, Manual had a good team, was ranked in the top 10 most of the season, even though turned out finished with like a 6-5 record. Right. And at that point, you really began to blossom, and if I'm not mistaken, you made All-State your junior year.
That's correct.
And I also believe that you were the top vote getter on the Courier-Journal's All-State team as a junior.
Possibly. I don't know.
Well, I do, and I'm right. So we'll just go on from there. So
I had a great junior year. I really did, as I recall. And then, I guess one of the, when you talk about stats, I just remember my junior year, I was in contention for the scoring title, but that's because we had a pretty daggone good football team, even though we were 6-5.
Yes.
We were probably the best 6-5 team in the state of Kentucky.
Well, that goes without saying. There were a number of All-State players on that team, and players who went on either from your class or the class before who went on to play college ball. And that was also just a really good year in Louisville football all over, and there were a lot of good teams. Mayo, Flagey, St. X all had good teams. And yet you began to emerge even then as a sophomore who didn't play any varsity ball but was around. I could see you emerging as a leader even that junior year. Any games that junior year stand out to you?
You always remember the Mayo games.
Of course.
But I guess one of the games as a junior that I remember pretty distinct, or more than anything, I guess, would be the Flagey game, because they were always tough. But I just remember Brom or Hughland. I just remember how tough they were. So Flagey, of course, every year they were one of those kinds of teams that you remember. But Thanksgiving Day is automatic in Flagey, and so those two particular games I kind of remember. And I think the St. X game, which we had an opportunity to win and didn't, I think, because of a drop pass in the end zone. So the St. X game stands out too. That was our junior year.
Okay.
I think it was 10-7, something like that.
And fans, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with our guest, Wilbur Hackett.
Hi, I'm Ivy Brito with State Farm Insurance, located in the Dixie Manor Shopping Center on Dixie Highway. And I'm proud to sponsor this segment of annual sports coverage on Old Goat Radio. I hope that you will think of me for all your insurance and financial services needs. Like a good neighbor. And oh, by the way, go Manual.
This segment of Old Goat Radio is brought to you by Chandy's Sporting Goods and Screen Printing, specializing in team uniforms and equipment. They're located at 5310 Valley Station Road. Just give them a call, 935-7557. They've been doing it for years, and you'll get a great deal. Mention you heard this ad on Old Goat Radio and receive a 10% discount.
If you're a member of a sporting team, then you need the proper equipment to perform at your very best. Come to Shively Sporting Goods, where you can get it all in quality team equipment and uniforms. For over 37 years, Shively has been serving Kentuckians by providing name-brand sporting goods and uniforms for team sports such as lacrosse, baseball, softball, and football, soccer, field hockey, track, and others. We also offer complete dance and cheerleading apparel, along with a full line of activewear for both men and women. And for recognition of a job well done, you can choose from a wide variety of elegant trophies and awards. You can't afford to play the game without the right equipment, so visit the team specialist at Shively Sporting Goods today.
Hey fans, want to protect yourself, your family, or your business? Then check out Louisville's one-stop shop for security, the Safety and Security Store. You'll find great deals on everything from video monitors to self-defense products. They're located at 622 Baxter Avenue in Louisville, Kentucky. Give them a call, 502-587-8273, or visit their website at safetysecurity.store.com. And remember, their business is your security.
At the heart of every community in Kentucky, you'll find one. Your local high school is a place to gather, a reason to cheer, a source of unmistakable spirit. The Kentucky High School Athletic Association is a proud supporter of high school athletics in the Bluegrass State. You can be too. Get in the game. Attend a high school sporting event in your community. This message brought to you by the KHSAA.
Old Goat Radio is brought to you in part by Todd Klondike and Opia Properties. Opia Properties is Louisville's real estate solution. Find everything you need to buy or sell a home in the Louisville market. Let them make searching for a home in Louisville stress-free. Give Todd a call at 802-2216 or visit him on the web at toddklondikerealtor.com. And by Activears, offering the very best in hearing protection and enhancement. From the instant mold line of earplugs to eyewear, they have a solution for you. Give them a call at 502-876-6640 or visit their website at active-ears.com or their store at the Bluegrass Indoor Range located at 4402 Kiln Court.
Welcome back, fans, to Old Goat Radio, and our special guest today, Wilbur Hackett, and we've covered your early years at Manual, and now I want to get into your senior year, the big year, the state championship year. And you mentioned your junior year that you were in the contention for a scoring championship. What happened your senior year? I know you had a lot of preseason accolades, but tell us a little bit about your senior year.
We just were a balanced football team. We had great football players, which we had every year, but my senior year was really special because we were matured. We had played together since we were sophomores, and basically we were all back. I mean, you could almost take the 11 starters that we had on offense. Back then we went both ways. You can take the 11 starters that we had on offense and defense, and most of them played from our sophomore years on. So by the time we were seniors, we were seasoned, and we had a lot of talent. So we didn't depend on one player. We had Gary Evans, we had Arthur Knight, we had Gordon Furman, Steve Craig, Russell Gibson, Jerome Perry. We had all the weapons, and we had Big Tim McDaniels and Paul Robinette and Buzz Frank.
Easy now. Let's not get too carried away.
But anyway, we had a great team, and so we had the talent. We really did. So you couldn't key on one player, and I didn't have to do as much my senior year because we had other players doing so much for the team. So it worked out. We had balance.
But as somebody who was there every day at practice and was on the field for the games, or at least on the sidelines for the games, watching, I know that when you say you didn't have to do as much, you did more because if you had an ego, you stuffed it in your pocket, and you mentioned Arthur Knight and Gordon Furman and Gary Evans, and when one of those guys was carrying the ball, most likely they were running behind you. You didn't follow the Jim Brown syndrome. You actually blocked for your teammates.
Let me tell you, I love blocking just as much as I did running the ball because football is a contact sport.
Oh, yeah.
And I just love the contact. So I didn't want to come off the field. In fact, I didn't come off the field unless we had a really big league, but I enjoyed defense where I played linebacker, and I enjoyed the offensive responsibilities as a fullback for blocking for the other player. So blocking was just as important to me, or just as much fun to me as running the ball. And I enjoyed it. I did it. And I enjoyed doing it.
And I think that many people who saw you play, probably the first thing they would say was that when you got the ball, you just exploded into the line. You were quick getting to the line and through the line as a fullback, and that may be their first impression of you, but you did so much more because you played linebacker and you blocked and you did everything. You were on the punt team, the kickoff team, and everything, and you were on the field. If it took 60 minutes or 48 minutes in high school, you were on the field for 48 minutes.
Well, that's what I enjoy doing, and as like I said, I didn't want to come off the field, and unless I had to, unless the coach took me out, I didn't come off. So that's what I wanted. To me, that was part of what the expectations were, to go. Like I said, now they have, I guess they specialize and they have specialties, but then we didn't have the numbers that some of the teams have, but everybody went both ways back then. Now all the teams have specialties, I mean, where you go offense or defense, but when we played, we went offense. You put your best athletes on the field, so we went offense and defense.
And you certainly were one of the best in the state again your senior year, and had there been a Mr. Football in Kentucky back then, you would have been Mr. Football. And I can say that. I know you're too humble to say that,
yeah,
but believe me, fans, I can say it because it's true.
Yeah.
So tell us about a few of the games that maybe stand out your senior year.
Well, you can start with the first game and just and I'm not really sure. I know we played Shawnee early in the season.
That was the second game.
That was the second game. The first game, who was the
Bishop
first?
David.
Bishop David. Bishop David, Shawnee, and then I know St. X. Yeah, and starting with after Shawnee, after we beat Shawnee, and they didn't have the team that they had a junior because they were really good my junior year.
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact, I think they were runner-up for the state my junior. I'm not sure, but they were pretty good. But I knew after the second game, after we beat Shawnee, we were on a roll. And I remember the St. X, and we beat them pretty good, and then we beat everybody else pretty good. And then we got to Paducah Tillman. We went down there, and we got out there with just a 6-0 win. I vividly remember that, and I just remember we won 6-0, and it was just good to get that one on our belt. So I knew the team was special from the Shawnee game on, and we were very fortunate to win all of our games until, of course, the last game.
And we'll get to that last game in a minute, but one thing that stands out, or a couple things stand out about that trip down to Paducah, the long bus ride was actually the first time in my life I'd ever had Kentucky Fried Chicken when we rode on the bus. But just how the game was so unique, I guess, because it really felt like maybe they had more than 11 players on the field against us that night.
Well, they might have, but that was I think that was a true testament of the kind of team that we had. We truly faced adversity in Paducah.
Yes, we did.
I mean, we were not supposed to get out of there with that win, and quite frankly, I felt like we would, but it was pretty touchy. But I can remember how tough it was to play in a game in the conditions that we played under, which I won't exaggerate on, but it was tough. But I can remember, you asked me to think of games. That was one of the games that we really had to play hard, and that told a lot about the character of that team. And I can remember one of the best hits I've ever had, and I had many, but one of the best hits I've ever had in my life was at Paducah when one of the players, I kind of curled back on him, and it might have been out of frustration, but I think as hard as I ever hit any player in my life. As a matter of fact, I have met people or players who played on that team, and they told me about that hit, and I said, I remember that. So anyway, that was a really tough game, and like I said, we were really tested, and I think, again, it was a testament as to the kind of team that we had.
I agree, and being a junior on that team, I've got to tell you, I don't know how great of a football player I became, but I know I was a lot better because I practiced against guys like you and McDaniel and the rest of the team every day. William Schultz, another linebacker, because we did a lot of drills together as linebackers. Stanford White. I know I became a lot better, and part of that was spring practice going into my junior year, your senior year. A lot of the drills that we did were together, and again, I could see how hard you pushed yourself, and I'm thinking, that's Wilbur Hackett. He's pushing himself that hard. How can I let up when here's this guy doing this? So, and it paid off at Paducah. It certainly did, because that was, like you said, we shouldn't have gotten out of there. And some people would say, well, you were fortunate that Steve Craig intercepted that pass and ran it for a touchdown. No, we played, and Steve Craig did what he was supposed to do, and he got in the way of that ball and scored. And I'm sure there were a few blocks laid on people on the way to get him into the end zone.
There might have been one of them. I'm not sure.
Well, and then from Paducah, of course, we went on into the season, and before the Mail game, we had the state championship game against Butler, and that was one of those bittersweet games for all of us that were on that team in 1966.
Of course, then we played the championship game before we played Mail, and a lot of times people say, well, if you had something to do when you look back, how would you do it differently? Well, I would have rather played in the Mail game and not have played in the championship game if I had a choice, because I think, no doubt, I think we handled, because I ended up not even playing the whole game against Butler anyway, and we still won something like 33-14, so we beat them pretty handily. So if I could do anything differently, I would have rather missed that game and played in the Mail game, because that was, again, if there's anything I could ever redo anything, it would have been to have beaten Mail, and in my 3 years, we never beat Mail. But my senior year, I know if we had our complete team, we would have. I don't even want to talk about it, but anyway, that would. I think I feel very strong about the fact that if our team was together, if everybody was healthy, that would have been one of the games I think that we would have gone out on a very strong note. So.
I agree, and for a couple of reasons. Not only were you hurt and couldn't play the whole game against Mail, of course, Gary Evans, our quarterback, hurt his ankle, and he was at best 50% of what he'd been, if that, and Gary was an exceptional quarterback.
Yes, he was.
And the other part of that is one of the players who tried to replace you on the field, I know the difference in the talent level of Wilbur Hackett versus Buzz Frank. And,
I don't think it was that.
Well, yeah, that had a lot to do with it. And plus, to be honest with you, I can look back 40-plus years and say, Male didn't have to worry as much about blocking me as they would have about blocking you.
Well, it's like a chain. If you got a missing link, then something's not going to function properly. And it wasn't so much that I couldn't be replaced. It was just that we were so used to each other.
Right.
And when you have that chemistry, when you have that cohesiveness, then it makes a difference if something's missing. So it's just about the chemistry, and it wasn't so much a talent, but just what we had been used to doing.
And that was built up over those 3 years or even longer.
Exactly.
that we had. And the interesting thing is, and you may not remember this, and why I do, I don't know, but I remember that you were quoted after the Thanksgiving game as saying the state championship means nothing.
Exactly.
And you still feel that way?
Well, I think it's significant that we won the that statement was made out of emotion. It does mean something, but and maybe I can't over-exaggerate how important the Male Manning game. The largest crowd ever to see a game at Fairground Stadium ever was Male Manning game that year.
That's right.
So, the state championship didn't have that many people. And I'm not going to say that the state championship didn't mean anything, but I personally, the male game was more important than the state championship. I mean, maybe I'm taking a little bit out of context, but that was big to me. As I look back, the Male Manning game was the game.
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm don't misunderstand me now. I'm glad that we went, in history as a team that won the state championship. And as a matter of fact, the last team to win a state football championship in Manual was that team. So there is some importance there. But the male game was so big. So if I had it to do over again, I don't know. I think I'd rather won the male game.
That's one of the things I go through life and I say, well, there's not much I would change in life, but if there were anything to change in life, and I would have sat the bench the whole game for us to have beaten Male that year, and taken what I feel like was our place in history as one of the great football teams at Manual, because it did lose some luster with losing to Male after that state championship game. And you're right, it is huge. I don't think the players today, even though Manual has won the last 2 years, I don't think the players today realize just how huge it is to beat Male High School.
Thanksgiving Day was turkey, dressing, and Male Manning.
Absolutely.
So it was huge. It was big.
Yeah, and that was the big day. And actually, it took how many years for the school to put our state championship picture up? And I don't want to get into the politics of all that,
I'm not
but
sure.
It certainly would have been up within a year had we beaten Male.
Exactly.
So as you stated, it was extremely significant. So we finished our senior year, and by the way, and I know it happens to you frequently because it happens to me, when I run into somebody from back in the day and we start talking about Manual back in those days, yeah, we were a state championship team. And I didn't realize, oh, wait a minute, that's right, Male beat you that year. It always comes up. So that's how significant it is to you youngsters who don't know quite what we're talking about. It's huge.
Very.
Now, I don't want to end at Manual yet, because I know that you also played a couple other sports while you were at Manual, or at least one.
Well, a little basketball, and I played baseball my sophomore and junior year, but not my senior year. So.
And the basketball team, I know we didn't win the regionals in your senior year, but came pretty close to a good Seneca team in the semifinals of the regionals, and the night or 2 nights before beat one of the best teams in the state in Male High School by a point, and you had a hand in all of that.
Yeah, all I did was play defense. That's all I did.
And as a linebacker, you did quite well on the basketball floor.
I kind of took my football skills on the basketball floor. So defense was my game.
That was, but I know that was an exciting time back then. The regionals were played at Freedom Hall.
Exactly.
And Male was one of the teams that was picked to have a shot at winning the state, and I believe we'd already lost to them 3 times that year.
I know at least twice, so maybe 3 times.
I was thinking regular season, LIT, and in the district.
Probably right.
But we won the one that counted.
Exactly. And then lost to Seneca on last second shot by Jim. He's a doctor, Jim Lahan.
Lahan, right.
Yeah.
And
remember it well.
And, of course, in the stands that night, I questioned whether he ever got the shot off before the clock expired, but you know, we'll have to say the officials probably knew what was going on and made the right calls.
Well, we'll give them the benefit of the doubt. Okay.
So you had a good career, and you mentioned going to Manual for the academics.
Right.
How did that prepare you? I know football in a lot of ways prepared you for what you would go on to do later in life, but how about the academics at Manual?
Well, I just remember Mr. Disler's math class and some of the physics. And the mechanical drawing, and I think that's what we called it back then, mechanical drawing, and it was just academically Manual, and was good then, but it's great now. So the tradition continues for the academic excellence at Manual High School, and that was one of the things that we looked at, you know, in picking a high school, and I just enjoyed the whole educational curriculum that Manual had to offer.
It was challenging, and you mentioned Mr. Disler, and again, before we leave Manual, talk about some of the other, whether they were coaches, teachers, or whatever, some of the other influences that you had while you were at Manual.
Well, you know, of course, the coaches. I can't talk about Manual without talking about the coaches that we had. As a matter of fact, we had. In all 3 of my seasons, I had 3 different head coaches.
That's right.
I had we had Coach Bradshaw my sophomore year. Coach Tom Harper my sophomore year. We had Coach Billy Mitchell my junior year, and then Bentley, Coach Bentley our senior year. So all those coaches had a Coach Bentley, Coach Mitchell went on to Murray State, and as a matter of fact, I had entertained going to Murray just because of Coach Mitchell. But he was all of our coaches had a real influence, and then Coach Yarborough, and
nobody can forget Coach Yarborough.
Coach Yarborough. So we had a lot of great members. As a matter of fact, all the coaches. I mentioned the head coaches, but a lot of the coaches had a lot to do with shaping who we were, and not only as football players, but as characters and men. And then the teachers that I had, Mr. Disler, Mr. George, and Coach Sharopoulos, and Mr. and Coach Reese running around there ragged. But I mean, you know, we had a lot of good people, and some of the other teachers, and I can't remember them all, but all the teachers had a great deal to do with who we were and making sure that we stayed in line. So, you know, again, I can mention Mr. George and Mr. Disler, Mr. Reese, and some of the others. I can't remember, but we had many good teachers that played a part in keeping us straight.
Manual did have, I know a lot of good teachers, and interestingly, I had a lot of the teachers that you just mentioned, and they touched me in similar ways because they not only taught, but they brought the best out of their students. They put something out there and didn't just feed it to you. They made you kind of reach out and grab it and learn and grow from it, much the way the coaches did for us on the football field. Right,
and, you know, and like you said, you know, it's not only football and teachers, but and I can't, and all of my football coaches were special, but I really can't mention being special about a coach unless I mention Coach Lucia Robles, who was not only a basketball coach but a mentor and truly a gifted person who meant a lot to all of the players that played under him. So he was very special too.
And he was one of the coaches and teachers who took the time to talk to the players, to be with them. And I even remember he was my JV coach. He came out and helped the football coaches my sophomore year, and one thing I remember was he was the only person I ever saw who could throw a football from one side of the practice field to the other. It's just incredible.
Right. And let me mention also Coach Peffer, who was a baseball coach and assistant basketball coach, and Coach Guerin, who was our backfield coach. And I can't be on this radio, this talk show, and be in this building and not mention Harvey, who was a caretaker of the field, he was almost like another coach, another teacher, a person who was a part of the whole Manual family that molded us. And Harvey meant as much to this to DuPont, Maine as anyone that participated on any level. So I can't go without mentioning his name.
Harvey was just an icon around here for the hours he spent working on the field, fixing things up. And as a player, I knew about him, and I knew that he was around here all the time. But later on in business, when I came over here and I had some work to do, and I got a chance to really see behind the scenes and find out even more of what he did. And he really deserved the honor of having the field named after him. And you're right, he was just a tremendous influence as far as getting the field ready, taking care of the practice field, taking care of the locker rooms and all of the other things that went in. And by the way, before we leave, we want to take you out and show you the locker room because Coach Peffer and his sons renovated it. It doesn't look anything quite like what it was in our day.
Well, good.
So, but let's move on now. Yes, this is a Manual website, but we want to know a little bit more about Wilbur Hackett. And from Manual went up to UK, and a lot of people probably were curious back in the day in 1967 why you chose UK.
Well, you know, I guess the only thing I can say is that came down to being where I felt most comfortable, and I had to put it in perspective. My first choice was Michigan State, without a question.
That would have been my question: is why not Michigan State? Because of Franklin Foreman being up there and Sherman before
Sherman
you.
Lewis before me. It was they offered me a scholarship. I went up there a couple of times. Matter of fact, I was going there again, and I was supposed to sign with Michigan State. And it came down to my parents and my family and being close to home, and I guess me being close to my family. And so I chose UK, and also the recruitment that they did on me. Not only did Coach Bradshaw come on very strong, but also the first two African Americans to attend the SEC school at UK was Nat Northington and Greg Page, and they did a great job of recruiting me. So they convinced me that UK was a place for me. So, and I had a lot of people at Manual, and who were saying, you go to UK, and a lot of encouragement from other people. But my family, and then the recruitment that they did, and also the fact that Nat and Greg were there, Nat Northington and Greg Page were there, kind of convinced me that was the place I needed to go.
And just to set the stage for people, and we don't need to dwell on the negative, and we certainly won't, but that was the summer of 1967 that some people call the summer of love, and if you were in San Francisco, maybe, but in other areas of the country like Detroit, we had some of the worst rioting in the history of the United States. And with that backdrop, you chose to help take the next steps at UK to transform a program, or help transform a program, into what it's become today, 3 bowl seasons in a row.
Well, I had nothing to do with that, because I don't even think, I can't remember winning a game in the SEC when I was there. But anyway, it was a good step for me as far as football. And the exposure that the SEC has today was pretty much indicative of how strong it was. Even back then, it wasn't that strong because football wasn't as big, but it was still a strong conference. So I think I made the right decision. And the success of UK today has been a culmination of what they've been trying to put together for years. And so finally now the teams are now starting to be consistently good.
Finally starting to come together. And you at least had, in my mind, a small part of that.
Well, yeah, and I appreciate that.
And yes, I am prejudiced towards you because because of all I've learned from you over the years. But I know a lot of this was outlined in the HBO special of Breaking the Huddle. Anything you'd like to elaborate on from down there, or?
When I chose to go to UK, and this Breaking the Huddle, 40 years after I went to UK, was an experience, was an eye opener for me, because when I chose to go to UK, even though I know there weren't any African Americans except Nat and Greg in the SEC, I never looked at it as a history making step. I just looked at it as a place to go play football and to get my education. But it turned out that a lot of things were going on around me socially, which I was aware of, but not to the magnitude. When I saw this HBO special, I understood and realized the magnitude of the social changes that were taking place right in front of me. But because my focus was on football, again, I was aware of these. I was socially aware, but I couldn't let it affect what I was doing. As a matter of fact, I remember the Black Student Union at UK came to me and asked me to quit playing football. And I considered doing it because they said, because of social injustices, they're not treating us right, not treating you right, really, you need to boycott. And some black players and other African-American players in other schools did, but I considered it. But then when I thought about it, I came to school to play football. And even though I was faced with situations, racial slurs and situations where I was denied food going into the South, or denied the opportunity to eat in restaurants, all I did was go out on the football field and take out my frustrations. So, part of what made me go, what kept me going, was my ability to play football. And again, historically, I wasn't looking to be a history maker. I was just looking to play football and do what I love doing, and that was to play football. So that's what I concentrated on, and that's what I did. But there was a lot going on, and as you know, in the 60s and 70s, a lot of social changes took place. But my thing was football, and that's what I did.
Well, when I think of the changes, and I think of you going from Manual, and from what I remember of our team, we were a pretty diverse group, and you talked about that cohesiveness that we had. It was like that off the field, on the field, for the most part. I know there was some friction, but probably nothing like what you faced up at UK, number one. And number two, you went from a winning program to a program that was kind of down.
Exactly. I think things happen in our lives for reasons. I went to my elementary and junior high school, and then it was elementary 1 to 6, and junior high 7 through 9. So I went to an all-black elementary and junior high school, and by going to Manual, I think Manual prepared me for what I had to deal with at UK. The situations I had to deal with. I dealt with, and there were many, and if we start talking about that, we'd be here all night. But there were a lot of situations. But because I had been exposed to integration and integrated high school, I think it prepared me for what I had to deal with at UK. So I was able to deal with it.
And so you came out of UK, and we're not going to stop at the UK experience right there, but you came out of UK with an education not only in the classroom and not only on the football field, but outside of both of those.
Taught me a lot about life.
Absolutely. And, well, let's go back to your football career at UK a little bit. As I stated in the opening, you were, actually, we'll state later, I didn't state it in the opening, you were the first African-American captain of an SEC team, and I think, weren't you captain 2 years down there?
Yeah, 69 and 70, right.
So the team chose you as a captain as a junior, which for most teams, that's pretty unheard of.
Well, and I can't explain why, but again, all I can say is that when I practiced as hard as I played, and I think I got the respect of the players because they knew that when I did something on the field or off the field, it was 100%, and I always gave it my effort. Like I said, in practice or in a game. I was kind of tireless in playing, and I think based on my efforts, and fortunately I had some leadership ability. I just think that the players gained a respect for me, and through that respect, and because of that respect, they elected me captain my junior and senior year. Like I said, I did everything the same way during the game. I did the same way. I practiced just as hard as I played, and they recognized that the way that I went about my approach to the game. So as a result, they elected me captain both years.
And anybody who I've ever talked to who knows you, whether they've just come to know you recently or have known you all their life, has that same respect for you. And I want to say that right now as we're looking across the table at each other, because of who you are, how genuine you are, and how hard you work. So you earned that title. And I also know how humble you are, so I can say all of this stuff where you won't.
Well, I do appreciate it. Thank you much.
So tell us about some of the games in the SEC that on the field had an impact on you. Maybe a game you played well, or...
Well, the first game comes to my first game. One of the games that my sophomore year, I had the distinct honor of playing against Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
Missouri had an All-American quarterback, running back. Roger Worley was a safety who played for St. Louis Cardinals. James Williams, I think, was a running back, played for the Bears. Mel Gray, who was a sprinter and played on the team, and my brother-in-law, Garnet Phelps, who...
That's right. He played quarterback over there, didn't he?
He was a quarterback, and he was a quarterback, and the score ended up being 12-6, and the starting quarterback was a guy named McMillan, but my brother-in-law came in and threw the only score, the touchdown pass to Mel Gray that Missouri played. So that's one of the, I guess, that was one of the big games. And as a matter of fact, either Missouri went on to tie Alabama or beat Alabama in the Gator Bowl that same year. But that was probably, there were many good games, but that was probably the highlight, and that was a good way to start out my sophomore year. But there were so many games that we beat Kansas State and we beat Ole Miss when they had Archie Manning in my junior year. Mm-hmm. But there were some really good games and came close. But I think the thing about my career was playing against so many great players. And even though we went 2-9, 3-8, and 2-9, but the opportunity to play against so many great players and also to have so many great teammates. One of the best players that come out of the state of Kentucky was a guy named Dickie Lowndes, who played right over at St. X. And Dickie Lowndes, I can tell you stories and stories about him, but he was a great athlete. And not only that, he was a great friend in Jeff Van Noten and some of the other players. But not only did I get to play against great teams, but I had great teammates who are now doing very, very good for themselves. And the list goes on and on. And one of my good friends, and I can't come on there and not say, because he gets on me all the time, was a guy from St. X by the name of Paul Karam, who not only was my good friend at UK, but is still my good friend even today.
And Paul Karam graduated from St. X the same year I graduated.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, I've caught footballs from quite a few guys throwing them over the years, and was fortunate to intercept one of his passes, and I have never felt a ball come into my hands more softly than the pass that he threw.
Well, let me
it just
say,
had a tight spiral, and I just happened to be in the right spot, or he didn't see me because he was a great quarterback.
Let me say this about Paul, and he would appreciate this. He threw me too, so welcome to the club.
Well, there we go. And they may have been the only 2 interceptions he ever threw at St. X. Paul was a great quarterback and an excellent punter as well.
Right.
And so it's glad to know, and I know he still does a lot over at St. X. And,
yes, he does.
And he was a great player and a great person to play against. And a couple other players that you didn't mention, but I know both had long NFL careers. Joe Fetterspiel and Danny Neal.
Danny Neal, both are really good friends, and I see them on occasions now. But like I said, there are so many. Jeff Van Noten. Also, Kerry Shea had my roommate on the road when we were there, and then so many. Houston Hogg who was the other African American player who signed with me. Albert Johnson, Thomas Jefferson. So there's so many people that I came in contact with that had an impact and that I still remember for the good times that we had.
And early on, you mentioned Greg Page and Nat Northington, and I know Greg had a tragic. And this is not Greg Page, the boxer.
Right.
Greg was from Middlesboro, I believe, and
Middlesboro, Kentucky,
seems like he broke his neck early on in his career and never really got to play much at Kentucky.
Well, actually, it was his sophomore year. It was in the spring. It was in the summer. I'm sorry, the August practice that we first reported. And if there was anything that ever impacted my life, I think that was one of those life-changing experiences that you will always remember. And I don't think Greg is remembered enough for what he did for football in the state. But it was a tragic incident, and he did suffer a spinal injury. Actually, quit breathing on the field, and they brought him back and resuscitated him on the field, and then he died. I think 38 days later, they took him off the life support. but he was an outstanding individual, not only a great athlete, but an outstanding individual. And he was one of the primary reasons that I went to UK, because he recruited me, because he was one of the persons that they put me with when we were recruiting. Nat was kind of quiet and intellectual. Greg was kind of a party and outgoing, so we got along pretty good. And but he was a great guy, and not only, like to say, not only a great athlete, but he was a great person, and truly was impacted my life. So.
Well, and that certainly was a tragedy, and I know it impacted a lot of people's lives as well.
Right.
But you stuck it out at UK with all of the things that happened over there, and you mentioned a lot of great teammates. Did you get a shot at the NFL? This is one thing I don't know.
You know, I never even thought about, there's a thing they call burnout, I believe.
Okay.
And by the time, for all the things that happened, and for, I guess, my limited athletic ability, lack of speed, and lack of other things, size, and I think the NFL really wasn't in the picture. And when I was completed my career at the UK, I was pretty much glad that I had already been convinced that my football career was over, and I was ready for it to end. I was just kind of burned out.
And it looks like, unlike some of the guys who've gone on and played for a lot more years, I know you still look very healthy to me, and I know you've got to stay in shape to keep up with the young kids that are running up and down the field in the SEC, but it looks like you didn't come out any the worse for wear. Did you have any other injuries besides the knee injury at Manual, like at UK or anything?
That, in all, when I went to UK, I never missed a game, and I very seldom missed a practice, unless I had a class or something, but I never missed practice or a game. I was very fortunate to stay healthy all of my career. The only game I missed was that one game in 1966 on Thanksgiving Day. That's the only game, my whole football career, 1966 is the only game I ever missed.
Boy, I wish we could play that one again with you healthy.
Don't even talk about it.
I know you've relived those times, and
times.
I believe your wife graduated from Mayo.
No.
But she is.
No, my wife's from Chattanooga, Tennessee.
From Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Yeah.
Well, where's so your sister's married to Garnet then?
Where's that? My sister is married to Garnet Phelps, who graduated from Mayo. And then my two sons, Keith and Trey, graduated from Mayo, and all of my nieces and nephews have graduated from Mayo.
But so you had two brothers who played at Manual.
And both my brothers played at Manual. Right, went to Manual. So so the men in the family went to Manual, and then my children went to Mayo, and all their children went to Mayo. So we have kind of a mix there. One
of the other things I remember that speaks highly again of your character is when they had a dinner before one of the male Manual games, not when they honored the 66 team on the field, but they had a dinner before one of the male Manual games over at the school, and that was when they finally put up the plaque by the lunchroom at Manual for the 66 team, and you couldn't make it, but you sent your son.
Okay.
And I can tell you that he represented you quite well. Even though he was a male guy amongst Manual people on red and white day, I guess, but he represented you well. He's a great extension of you as a father, and just showed the class that I know comes from being a Hackett.
I'm very proud of both my sons. Yeah.
Well, after you got finished with UK, I know you've done many things. And I know you've been at Toyota now for 17 years? Okay. 17 years. And I even remember at least once, probably more often than that, you umpiring softball games that I was playing in. Exactly. I know you did a little bit of umpiring. You've done a little bit of everything, I guess, since you got out of UK.
Yeah, I have. The last 17 years, I worked with the city for about 11 years, but the last 17 years I've worked, at Toyota. But I've always been interested in working with the youth. So I worked with a group years ago called the Concerned Young Men and Women, and worked with summer program through the city. But one of the things I'm pretty most proud of, in 1991 we started a baseball league in Shawnee Park called the West Louisville Rep Baseball League. Baseball had been missing from Shawnee Parks for 20 years, since 1971. was the last time they had baseball at Shawnee Park. So a group of us got together, Mike Carter, Lee Jones, and a group of others, Larry Brooks, we call him Sag, and then my brother-in-law, Garner Phelps, got together, formed this league, and the league still exists today. So those are some of the things that I really enjoy doing, and I really enjoy working with the youth throughout the past, some of the past years.
And growing up, I played a lot of baseball at Shawnee Park, and you're right, it was a crime that went away because they had a lot of parks down there. And it's not football, but baseball's a great game too.
It really is. It really is. It's a pastime. It's a great game.
And so with that, so that's still going on then?
It is still going on.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you ever get down there and give any tips or coach or anything?
I got grandchildren now, and so I pretty much follow them grandchildren, great nieces, and so I still have some of my cousins and some of my great nephews play in the Shawnee League. So I've seen them play, but I don't get a chance to go very often.
Any chance any of them might come up and switch back and come back over to Manual and leave that purple and gold behind?
I got a young cousin now that's pretty tough, and got to keep our eye on him.
Well, we'll keep looking for him.
Yeah, he's at Lyman T. Johnson now. So,
okay.
Yeah, he's a cousin. He's pretty good. I'll let you know about it.
Well, what about officiating in the SEC? I know off the air we talked about how just a tremendous football league it is. The last 3 national champions have come from there,
right.
and every week it seems like teams are just beating up on each other, and yet somebody comes through and manages to win. And you're out there with all those great athletes every Saturday.
Right. Well, one of the my passion is football, and I'm very fortunate to be able to officiate in a conference with the caliber of athletes and that the SEC has. It's the SEC is, I think, without a doubt, one of the toughest conferences in the country. And again, I'm very privileged to be a part of it. And I'll say my take on that is on Saturdays, there's not a better place to be than in a conference that has the SEC football team. And I'm also privy to having the best seat in the house. I'm right in the middle as an umpire, and I don't watch the game, but being a part of the game and being a part of the SEC is almost like a dream come true. I enjoy it. I truly love what I'm doing, and I pride myself on going and giving them the best every Saturday.
And that's the key, because the SEC wouldn't keep slouches because of the quality of football on the field. As an official, you have to be at the top of your game every week too.
Well, it's on a contract basis. I actually don't work for the SEC, but I'm on contract. I'm on a contractual basis for the SEC, so they can void, eliminate, or get rid of their contract at any point in my career. It could be I could go in today and have a letter saying your contract is over. So there are a lot of expectations, and I have to be able to go out there every Saturday and keep up with those gifted athletes, and it kind of keeps you on your toes. But it's been a great. I've been in the SEC for 12. This will be my 12th year, and hopefully next season at some point you have to think about retirement. So I think maybe next year could possibly be my last year, but it's been if I make it through, this will be 12, and then 13, hopefully 13 years next year.
Now you've got a voice and knowledge for the game. If you got out of officiating, do you think you might do something for the UK network maybe, or on football?
Well, I'm not. I haven't.
Just throwing something out there. It's not quite as hard as running up and down the field.
I haven't been approached about anything like that. But I don't plan. If I come off the field this year or next year, then I do have plans to continue in some capacity. And it may not be with the SEC, but it could be with another conference, because I still have a passion for the game, and I'm not ready to just sit down and do nothing. So I would do something.
And I'll speak for all of the old goats. We would more than welcome to have you show up on a Friday night and share the booth. I'll pass the mic off and let you do all the hard work while I run out and do fan interviews in the stands or something like that. But I know we'd certainly appreciate it, and with your travel schedule, I know it probably can't happen, at least for a while. But Old Goats would certainly welcome you into the booth anytime you show up at Manual Stadium.
I appreciate the offer, and we'll talk about that.
All right. Fans, we're getting ready to wrap it up, and currently what I want to finish is a little bit different than the way I normally finish our interviews, but many of you know about the videos that circulated on YouTube last year, and if you want to read my take on it or want to hear my take on it, you can look it up at Old Goats Online and see the article that I wrote a few months ago concerning Wilbur and the incident on the field. But I want to read a quote. This comes from Fan House, and the writer is Michael David Smith, and this will serve to kind of wrap up our show. But late in the documentary, and this is the documentary that we talked about, Breaking the Huddle, the HBO special. Late in the documentary, we're introduced to Kentucky linebacker Wilbur Hackett, who was the first African-American captain of an SEC team. Playing for Kentucky at a time when many SEC schools still didn't have black players, Hackett is one of the most significant players in the history of college football. Hackett is now an SEC official, and he became a YouTube star this season when he had an on-field collision with South Carolina quarterback Stephen Garcia. The resulting video was amusing, but it would be a shame if that's what Hackett is most remembered for. Breaking the Huddle puts Hackett in his proper historical place. And again, that was from Fan House. The writer is Michael David Smith. I certainly can't add much more to that, but I'm going to anyway. And my last line is a few years ago we had a reunion of our 66 state championship team. And I can tell you that before I got to the stadium, when I got to the stadium, anybody who knew me and knew I was a part of the team had one question for me, and the question wasn't, isn't it great that we're getting back together or anything like that? It was, is Hackett going to be here? And when I met the rest of our teammates, every one of them had the same question for each other. Has anybody heard from Wilbur? Is Hackett going to be here? And when you came, everything else stopped. And to me, that says a lot about who Wilbur Hackett is, who you've been, who you continue to be, because you carry the respect of all of your former teammates from Manual, from UK, and all of the people who've come to know you. And I'm not blowing smoke. This is the real deal.
Well, thank you. I can't say how much that means to me, but all I can say is that that happens because I love DuPont Manual High School, and I will always have that love and passion for Manual, and I do appreciate your comments.
Well, thanks again for coming in, Wilbur. And fans, for my co-host, David Wright, and Kevin Cole, and our producer, John Wright, this has been a really great day, and this already has gone down in history as my favorite interview, Mitch McConnell aside. Mitch, I love you, but Hackett's my man. And for Old Goat Radio, I'm Buzz Frank.
This segment of Old Goat Radio is made possible by the generosity of Aztec Flooring. From commercial flooring to athletic applications, Aztec has led the way since 1985 and are now representing AstroTurf in Kentucky. Call 800-490-1580 to make your appointment to visit their Louisville showroom or visit them on the web at aztecflooring.net.